Hey everybody, this is Dan from Pain Free You. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Janet from South Africa. Did you say Victoria?
Pretoria, South Africa.
Pretoria. I didn't know that name, so my apologies. So welcome. Janet has suggested she would be willing to share her story with my audience here. So welcome. Thank you. And why don't you take us on a little journey? Let us know what you've been through and where you're at and the steps along the way.
Thanks so much, Dan. So thank you for this opportunity to share my story. I must say I've listened to a lot of your success stories, and I hope that at one point I'd be well enough to do one. So I'm grateful to be here.
Awesome.
So just a bit of background information. So I'm a medical doctor. I qualified in 2015, and then I decided to specialize in a field called nuclear medicine, which is a very fascinating field that I'm very passionate about. It obviously was quite stressful though, and these symptoms actually started about a month before my final exams.
It should.
It was just a just a normal day of me sort of getting up early and sitting down to study, and suddenly felt a very strong urge that I needed to urinate. So I went to the toilet and relieved myself, but when I got back to my desk, I just felt like my bladder was still full. And as a medical doctor, I thought this is probably just a urinary tract infection. So immediately got myself a dipsticks, checked my urine, and my urine was actually clear. But the symptoms were just so typical of a urine infection that I thought, let me just take antibiotics. And being a doctor, I've got the privilege of prescribing my own antibiotics. I don't even have to see a doctor. So I prescribed myself a single dose and, hope for the best. And the symptom just didn't go away. So I was a little bit concerned, but I thought, maybe I just need a bit of a stronger antibiotic, maybe a bit of a longer course. So I actually took a 5-day course of antibiotics after sending my urine in for culture. And after getting my culture back, I saw that even sending it to the lab, there was nothing abnormal in my urine. There was no blood, there was no nitrites, leukocytes, or any of the typical things we look for in an infection.
Sure.
So this is now about a month before my exams, and I was a bit concerned, but I just rationalized it must just be something that the lab's not picking up. It will go away. But then what really that's disturbed me was when I went for a run, which is something I love to do to clear my mind, and the symptom just got from maybe a 4 out of 10 to like a 10 out of 10.
Right.
I was basically stopped within like about 2 to 3 minutes of my run with this intense feeling like I needed to empty my bladder. So I ran to the bathroom and there's almost nothing in my bladder. And it was just such a strange sensation. And that's when I was a bit concerned what's going on here. And I just quickly went to the pharmacy and just got some bladder support supplements and
Mhm.
a little bit of medication and, just really hope for the best. But I was really stressed about my exams. So I knew I had to also focus and study. And, the symptoms went away a bit. And then on the morning of the exam, they came back with a vengeance. It was absolutely horrendous. On my way to the venue, my mom actually drove me because I was just not in the state of mind to even drive myself to the venue. We went over a couple of rocks and just on the road, and just that sensation was like sharp knives in my bladder, I want to say. The exam was on a Thursday, and on a Friday, it was 2 consecutive days. The first paper was a multiple choice, and the second paper was a written paper. And, during my first multiple choice paper, I had to ask the invigilator a couple of times to use the bathroom, which was quite embarrassing. And I was so bewildered when I went home that afternoon on the Thursday, knowing I've got the second paper the next day, which was a more stressful paper because it
Right.
was a written exam. But I came armed with, my hot water bottle and a heat pack for my bladder, which was in so much pain. Took some pain medication, and I just informed the invigilator before the exam, I've got a bit of a problem. Please just, allow me to use the bathroom as necessary. And they were very kind, fortunately. So after that Friday, I'd now just done the 2 exams. By God's grace, I got through them. But I thought to myself, now what is going on? I have to go back to work on Monday. I've only got 2 days to figure this out and get back to work. So, I got an early night on the Friday night, and I thought on Saturday, the stress of this is over. Maybe I'm going to feel better. So I got up on Saturday and I was going to the gym for my run, and 2 minutes in, and I was just in this excruciating pain. And now I'm getting really panicked because I have to go back to work on Monday. I've got responsibilities to see to. And on the Sunday, I just realized there's no ways I can even drive to work. I was at that point, using the bathroom every 15 to 30 minutes. Just this constant feeling of my bladder being full to bursting, yet nothing coming out. So I, messaged my colleagues, which are also my friends, and they were fortunately understanding, but I was just sort of hiding how stressed I actually felt about this whole thing.
Right.
So come Monday morning, and I knew I have to see a urologist or a urogynecologist, even though I'm a doctor, I'm not a specialist in these fields. Probably about like a quarter of a lecture in medical school was devoted to these kind of topics. So certainly no expert in it. So I was calling and calling, and my mom was helping me because my mom was, very concerned for me as well. And on this Monday morning to get an appointment, and I got an appointment with a urologist who was very kind and agreed to see me sort of late in the afternoon as a sort of gesture to a colleague. And no sooner had I left for that, and the urogynecologist called and said she could also help me on the Tuesday. So I thought, well, it's a good idea to keep both appointments because it could be urological or gynecological.
Right.
So when I went to the urologist, she did her special urine test. Urine was all clear. She did an ultrasound. Ultrasound was fine. So
Right.
despite feeling like my bladder was full, there was actually nothing in my bladder.
Right.
And she thought, let's just do a CT scan just to make sure there's no stone or anything. CT scan was fine, nothing on the CT. So she said to me, she thinks maybe because I've been sitting so much, I've just got a bit of pelvic floor dysfunction, and I should get some physical therapy and some muscle relaxants and, follow up with her. So I felt quite reassured by that. And I went home and, I was still in a lot of pain, but I felt at least a little bit reassured. And the pain that night actually got just a tad better. Next day, I went to the urogynecologist now just to check there's nothing gynecological going on. And sure, that appointment did not go so well. It was about a 10-minute appointment, very, very brief. Basically, after telling my story, the urogynecologist said to me, okay, this is definitely interstitial cystitis, bladder pain syndrome. We need to just decide if you've got Hannah's ulcers because that will decide if you need what type of medication you need. So I can do your cystoscopy on Thursday. Here's the papers to sign, and I was just, this is crazy. I've just been told I've got pelvic floor dysfunction. Now I've got interstitial cystitis, bladder pain syndrome. Doesn't make sense. And in the back of my head, I thought, no, I've got to go to work. I don't have time for this on Thursday.
Right.
So then I thought, okay, let me just go with a urologist opinion first and try and get a physio appointment. But they were fully booked for 2 months, and I knew I can't wait 2 months for an appointment. So one of my mom's friends works at a pelvic floor therapy unit, and she knew someone who was not a physio, but she did something called tibial nerve stimulation and shockwave therapy. And she could help me on that Wednesday. So I went to her, and she was also very reassuring and very kind. And she said she's going to sort out my pelvic floor, and I'm probably just stressed and tense, and everything is tight. So she did that tibial nerve stimulation and the shockwave, and I actually felt so much better that night. I thought, okay, this is probably something that's going to work. And I went to work on Thursday, the next day, not obviously feeling great, but certainly better than I did on the Monday.
Right.
And so then I was, doing this weekly tibial nerve stimulation with her and the shockwave therapy, and things seemed to be getting quite a lot better. And now, just bearing in mind, I I still had my oral exam to do in October. So this was now around July I did of 2022 that I did my written and then my oral in October. So it was a little bit up and down, but overall definitely improved. I really thought the tibial nerve stimulation was working. Until about 5 days before my oral exam. And I woke up and I knew something was wrong. My bladder felt that same burning, awful sensation, literally out of the blue, similar to the first time. And I just tried to sort of fight through it and study. It's 5 days before my final exams of, studying for like it's 13 years since I've qualified, 4 years of studying in this field. It was such an important time for me to really crunch. And this pain was just so debilitating. But I sort of that Saturday, which was my exam, what was 5 days before. So the symptom was on the Saturday. The exam was the following week, Wednesday. By the Saturday evening at around 10 o'clock, I just knew I have to go do something. I need to get something to help me because
Right.
I can't study like this. I can't write an exam like this. And at that point, I'd also been on some overactive bladder medication, which can cause urinary retention. So I was convinced that I've gone into urinary retention because it felt like my bladder was full, and it literally,
Right.
even though I voided, it felt like I had a full bladder, the worst sensation ever. So that friend of my mom's, who's a doctor, we called her at 10 o'clock on that Saturday night, and she said, "Bring Janet, let's put a catheter in her and see maybe she's in retention." So we did that, and very little urine in my bladder. So it was such a bewildering time for me to have this sensation and not know what's going on. I know there's not an infection. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe that urogynecologist is right. Maybe I do have this bladder pain syndrome or interstitial cystitis. And I think that's when the fear really started getting, really big for me. So the next couple of days, I just took so much pain medication. I was basically just managing on a lot of sleep and knocking myself out. And by God's grace, again, I did that exam on the Wednesday on a day that I actually felt fairly okay. But, that was on a lot of medication, which actually, causes quite a lot of drowsiness. But, I fortunately was okay to do the exam because I think my body had kind of gotten used to the
Right.
medication by then. Um, and also, I had my doctor write a letter to the head of the College of Medicine to say, I'm struggling with this condition, let Janet use the bathroom as frequently. So I was grateful that I could do that to get through my exam. So after that was over, then I knew I need to figure out what's going on. And, I'd never seen the physical therapist before because, I'd gone the whole route of doing the tibial nerve stimulation. So I thought, let me try the physical therapy. But in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of other things. I'm prescribing myself so many different medications from amitriptyline, hydroxyzine, anything on the,
Right.
RC website that they recommend. High schedule medication to help with pain. Nothing worked. So I went to this physical therapist for about a month. So I started around October, just after my oral exam of 2022 to November 2022. And after about a month, it was just flaring me. I was getting worse, not better.
Right.
And it was just so frustrating because I thought my exams are not done. The stress is done. Why am I not getting better? Unless it is this dreaded disease, interstitial cystitis, which is just like you Google it and you get frightened by what you read.
Of course.
So, so after a month, she said to me, "Look, Janet, you're not getting better. I think there's something else going on. This is not your pelvic floor." So I went back to my urologist in November 2022, and she said, "Okay, now we need to do these tests and figure out what's happening. We need to do urodynamic studies. We need to do a cystoscopy, and we need to do a pelvic MRI." So this was before, it was the 15th of December 2022. It was just after my 31st birthday.
Right.
So I was admitted for the day. I first had the cystoscopy, and then I had to go to the MRI. And how I got through that, I don't know. The cystoscopy is not supposed to be such a painful procedure. But when I woke up, I just was shivering from pain. It was just awful. And then I didn't know how I was going to lie in an MRI machine for 30, 40 minutes because of the pain. But, I did that. And then after that, even worse was the urodynamic study, which is just the most, in my opinion, inhumane thing to do. After having a scope and just being in so much pain, I can't even describe that burning sensation. And at the end of the day, all the tests didn't really show anything.
Right.
So the MRI was done to assess my pudendal nerve to see if there was any entrapment because that can cause urinary symptoms. There was no issues. The cystoscopy, she didn't see anything of great significance,
Right.
and no Hannah's lesions or anything like that. And the urodynamic study, there was a little bit of the detrusor instability, but I didn't really make much of that because when you're putting saline in a bladder that is so irritated from just having a cystoscopy, you can expect a little bit of your detrusor muscle, which is muscle of the bladder, to be a bit overactive. And I hadn't responded to any overactive bladder medicines. I've been on Vesicare and Betmiga, and it did absolutely nothing.
Right.
So that December 2022, I was probably in the darkest space I've ever been. It was, I'd look forward to that time so much because I was now finished my exams. It was coming up, well, it was my birthday, coming up to Christmas, and the first sort of December, I didn't have to study in many, many years. And I was just so down and so depressed. And, I was also going on all these RC diets, eliminating pretty much everything.
Right.
And you start eliminating one thing like, acids and tomatoes and things that are supposed to be bladder irritants and citrus. And then you'll read someone says, oh no, oxalates are the issue. You must stop eating oxalates. You must stop eating dairy. And then eventually, by the time you've listened to everyone, you're basically living on a diet of like vegetables.
Right.
I did multiple elimination diets over a long period of time, and literally nothing worked.
Right.
So January 2023, I decided to discuss with my urologist what are the options now. Everything's fine, but I'm still having these symptoms. And I will say she was very kind. She was a lovely urologist. She really took me seriously. But, as I'll get to later, if this is just a condition, this TMS, mind body syndrome, it's not taught at medical schools, it's not recognized. And when doctors don't find anything wrong, it's like they have to search until they find something wrong, without realizing that, it can so commonly be this perceived danger pain, this neuroplastic pain, so many names for it.
Right.
But anyway, I had a work trip coming up in February, and I was really stressed about traveling, even though it was only about 1 or 2 hours in a plane. For me, that was just very terrifying because in a bad flare, I can be on the toilet every 15, 30 minutes.
Right.
So I had these bladder installations and, I had to arrange them after work because I didn't stop working during this time. So I had to make them sort of late in the afternoon, once a week for 6 weeks. And once again, it didn't work. It literally, if anything, it made me worse. Holding that medication in my bladder, the pain was not getting better. Um, so I just, at that point, I honestly thought I'm just going to live with this. I've just got to figure out how to live with this and work around my life. Forget about running. I mean, I hadn't run then. I think I stopped around October, just after that flare before my exam. I didn't even attempt running. I could barely even walk without getting pain. So that was also really hard for me because it was such a big part of my life. Then the next thing I tried was obviously you reading online and you reading any sort of self-help because I realized I don't think a doctor can help me. I mean, I'm a doctor, I can't help myself.
Right.
So I was reading online and I came across this Dr. Brianne Brogan, a physical therapist, overcome pelvic pain. And I think you actually did an interview with Michael Hodge at one point. He worked with her to create this program. And that was in May of 2023, sort of a 12-week program. And I can say I did improve somewhat with that program to the point that I could sort of engage in life a bit better. And when I say that, I mean like go to the grocery store without fear and, just go to work without feeling like I'm, running to the toilet every sort of half an hour. And her work was physical therapy, but she also had quite a lot of focus on the nervous system and how your nervous system can cause your pelvic floor to tighten and the importance of relaxing your nervous
Right.
system. So I think, that whole part of it is maybe the reason I improved a bit. It's just the sort of taking things slower, calming down, but it didn't explain to me like the more intricate details of perceived danger pain, how it develops, and that there's actually nothing physically wrong with your body.
Right.
And I think that's obviously why I never, really fully recovered with that. I still wasn't even trying to run at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was doing all these stretches and all these poses and like trying to stretch this out and stretch that out and massage this point and that point, trigger points everywhere. And, it got me to a point, but not uh, far from where I needed to be. Um, so then the next thing on my list was to try bladder Botox. So in September 2023, I thought, okay, this is the next step. Maybe this is more an overactive bladder, even though I've got pain. Typically, an overactive bladder shouldn't cause pain, but I was so desperate to try anything. And you go on these support groups, which are actually very toxic, and someone will say, "Oh, this helped me." So you think, okay, maybe it will help me. And it is in the guidelines. I'd obviously read the American Urological Association guidelines, and this was one of the things that could be recommended. So I did the bladder Botox in September of 2023, and that didn't work. I woke up in severe pain. Um, I should have been discharged immediately. It's not supposed to be painful, but I just really, really had severe burning after that Botox. And I still was a bit hopeful because it's supposed to take about 2 weeks to work, but it unfortunately didn't work. So, I honestly, I was so determined to get better, and I just was pulling at anything that could make me better.
Right.
And then you read, all these sort of people who are influential in the field, and one person said, if you didn't do well with one physio, maybe try another physio. So I decided, okay, let me try another physical therapist. So I booked another physical therapist appointment for November. I got it in November of 2023. And just before this physio appointment, I actually had a week of leave and I went away on holiday, and it was such a dismal holiday for me. That's one thing they say, that a lot of people, their pain improves when they go away on holiday. But for me, I think I put so much pressure on myself to just want to enjoy the holiday
That's why.
that I actually got worse. And, you know, on that holiday, that was the first time I actually came across your videos in November 2023. Um, I think it's because I was doing so much YouTube searching on chronic pain. So it actually just popped up on my YouTube. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. And I listened to a few of your videos. And, it was an interesting concept, but I thought, no, this can't apply to me. It's just not possible. This pain I'm experiencing is just so bad. This can't be it. But it was sort of a seed planted. It was in my mind, okay, maybe it could be related, but I've got this physical therapy appointment booked already. I'm not going to cancel it. Let's just try the physio. So
Mhm.
you had planted the seed then, Dan, but I was skeptical, unfortunately. And I
Everybody
wish I
is at
hadn't
first.
I wish I hadn't been, but I went for the physical therapy in November. And once again, I'll say most of my practitioners were actually really lovely people. Really, they were supportive, they took me seriously, and I'm really grateful to them. But once again, it's just the lack of knowledge, even physical therapists. And I think physical therapists should have a knowledge of this, because
Right.
so many people with these symptoms, even other, neuromuscular conditions, will be going to a physical therapist. And if they don't understand this whole concept of neuroplastic and perceived danger pain, that can really disservice their patients by making them think they've got something really physically wrong with them. So I went to this physical therapist, and like with the previous home physical therapy program, I also had some improvement. But I think it was more just about feeling safe, that someone was, helping me and someone was there for me and supporting me, rather than the actual exercises, more sort of a mental state thing. And once again, the running was just such an issue for me, because at this point I hadn't run for more than a year. I used to run sort of at least 5 times a week. It was really my outlet, and not being able to do that was really, really difficult. Um, so I carried on seeing her for a couple of months. The last time I saw her was in April 2024, but just to go a little bit backward, I decided around, I think it was around December of 2023, that I'm going to see a pain specialist, because I've actually never seen a pain specialist. Maybe there's some magical medication I haven't tried that he can prescribe me and it will help. So I saw a professor in pain management in March of 2024. Also, lovely, lovely doctor, very caring. He explained the whole physiology of pain to me. And, he was very focused on trigger points, and very convinced that most causes of pain, be it fibromyalgia or whatever pain it is trigger points, and you have to go and target those trigger points. So he located suprapubic trigger points in me, and he injected me with lidocaine, which was very painful. And I walked out feeling more pain than I walked
Yeah.
in.
I can't imagine.
Um, yeah. And he also prescribed me some amitriptyline, Lyrica, the typical sort of nerve medications, which I had been on before, but, I was put on a bit of a higher dose, and, I thought I'd give it a try. But as with my long history, I did not get to the point where I, could actually live my life freely. So that's when I think it must have been around April, May 2024 that I went back to you, Dan. I thought, let me go back to this, because literally I've run out of every medical option besides people.
Right.
If you look at the AUA guidelines, the next step for me, if you go according to the RC bladder pain syndrome guidelines, would be getting a sacral neuromodulator in, which is fairly invasive. And then then there's cyclosporin and all these other very sort of toxic medications without much evidence. And then even crazily, some people even opt for bladder removal, and which is absolutely horrendous. And I've even seen on some of these groups how people get their bladders removed and they still have pain. I mean, how dreadful is
Wow.
that? So I went back to you, Dan, and I really started listening to your videos and engaging with this whole concept of perceived danger pain, mind-body syndrome,
Mhm.
neuroplastic pain, TMS, like all these names, it's all the same thing.
Correct.
And I read a bunch of books. So you had obviously spoken about Sano. So I read The Mind Body Prescription by Sano. I read Overcome Your Pain by Howard Skubiner. I read The Way Out by Alan Gordon and a bunch of other books. I just read them like crazy, like just invested all my time reading and just educating myself on this stuff. And I listened to your videos about, overcoming the fear and always go to safety, all those concepts. And it was really hard. I mean, the concept is really simple, but implementing it when you are so fearful is so hard. And it was really such a challenging time, but I knew if this is my only shot to get better is to really give this a chance. And what really clicked for me is a lot of the things that I read in these books, and obviously things that you speak about on your channel. I did obviously your fit assessment, and that was for me very eye-opening. The functional nature of the pain. There's no structural abnormalities. The inconsistency, it was so bizarre to me that I did have periods of like maybe a week or two in the beginning of no symptoms at all. As the fear increased, I was in constant pain. Like there was no flare, it was just constant pain because of the fear. But it was inconsistent in a way. I mean, my symptoms also were much worse in the evening. So I'd wake up feeling sort of okay. By midday, it was quite bad, and then by the evening, I was like on the bed.
Right.
So that was also an inconsistency, which made sense to me why this applies to me.
Hmm.
And then the triggered of the fit assessment, that things like running, which are not dangerous activities, are triggering this pain. So that really, made me think this is what I'm dealing with. And then also reading about, the personality traits of being a people pleaser, perfectionist, self-critical, all those things. Like I thought this applies to me. And the fact that the symptoms came at a time in my life when I was really stressed, even though maybe I didn't recognize it at the time, um, it just made me realize this is what I'm dealing with. There can't be another answer. And that's when I became very invested in it. But even though I was invested in it, my fear was so high that it was really hard to make progress in the beginning.
Hmm.
And I will not, unfortunately, I was not one of those book cures. I know they're very rare when you sort of read
Very,
and you
very
feel
rare.
pain. Yeah, and certainly not sustained. I mean, you might have a day or two, but then the pain will come back.
Oh,
For me, it was a very long, long journey to getting better. Probably, I would say about 6 months. It took me before I could really say, I am so much better. I can, now I can run without pain. I can run like sort of 10, 12 Ks
got
and
it.
not even need the bathroom when I come in from my run. And if I do get a symptom here or there, which does happen, it's just about not fearing it so much and knowing that, this is just a symptom and, it will go away. It's not going to become chronic again. Because, at the end of the day, we're humans and, if you have these personality traits and you are sort of an anxious individual, you're prone to these things. But the trick is that it's not chronic pain. So I think we tend to be people who suffer with these conditions tend to be very perfectionistic,
Mhm.
and you sort of want to, delay everything until you're perfectly better. But that is not ever going to work.
Right.
You need to have the goal of getting rid of chronic pain and realize that if symptoms pop up here and there, that doesn't mean you're going back to where you were.
Correct.
Um, so I think that is sort of a long summary of my journey. Um, so I don't know if you've got any
And
questions to engage
yeah.
with.
So how long have you been feeling well?
Well, I would say from about October, November of 2024 that I've had sustained improvement. Obviously, from April to October, there was constant gradual improvement.
Ups and
Um,
downs.
ups and downs, but you know, the trajectory was improving. Um, but I mean, now, you know, for at least 3, 4 months, I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a very long time, but I think if I look at my entire journey of where I started to where I am now, I just can't even I can't even compare the difference in how I feel, and just being able to do simple things like just, you know, walk the 200 meters from my car to my work and not feel like I can't wait to get in the building so I can use the bathroom, you know. That pain was just, it was so limiting in what I could do, and a very personal issue as well. You know, I think one thing that helped me so much is listening to the success stories you have on anyone who had sort of bladder issues or pelvic issues, because I felt like initially when and maybe that's why I kind of rejected this stuff right in the beginning, because I thought it didn't apply to me, because a lot of the stuff was back pain and fibromyalgia and all those kinds of things. So I thought, oh, it doesn't really apply to urinary symptoms. So when I listened to those success stories, that's what really gave me a lot of hope that, okay, maybe this does actually apply to me. Maybe I can get better with these concepts.
Mhm.
So, you know, because I feel like even though all pain and all symptoms are terrible, you know, it's kind of easier to say, I've got terrible back pain, I'm going to go home early. I've got a headache, I'm going to go home early. But to say, oh, I've got terrible pelvic pain and my bladder is killing me, it's just a much more personal issue, you know. So
Embarrassing, right?
it's very embarrassing, and I think those stories of people who overcame that was really so inspiring and encouraging to me. And I mean, that's the reason why I'm sharing this today, is to hopefully help other people know that they can get better. And it's not necessarily going to be an easy journey, and there are going to be ups and downs, and you have to be consistent and persistent and trust the process. Get a coach if you need to get a coach. Join your support groups if you need support, you know, but believe that it can happen. You know, go through the process. I mean, obviously, you always want to rule out any kind of structural issue,
Mhm. But you had
but
done that for
I'd done
a
that
long
for
time,
so
years.
long, and despite ruling out structural issues and going for treatments, you know, nothing had worked. But yeah, and I think also, you know, one reason I wanted to share the story is also just maybe to highlight to other, you know, doctors, medical professionals, that you don't always have to find something physically wrong with a patient who's having a lot of pain, you know. I think, and this is just talking from the other side of the of the audience, you know, when you're in the doctor's shoes and the patient's got terrible symptoms, you feel like I've got to find out why, I've got to find out why, you know, and sometimes even amplify a small finding that you see to say, okay, that's why, you know, find a reason for the pain. Because if you don't understand neuroplastic pain, then you will end up giving false information to your patient and really delaying them from getting well.
And
I mean,
scaring the heck out of them.
it is so true. Yeah.
So that's wonderful. I mean, I'm thrilled to have a medical doctor here who um, benefited by this work. I know you utilized a number of resources. You mentioned a number of the books. Um, I'm thrilled to be a part of that equation, that my videos were something that really helped you lock into it. You know, the assessments you
Definitely.
did.
Yeah.
Um, I love the fact it took you a while because you saw it and then you're like, ah, it's not me. And then you came back around. But that
Yeah.
happens so often. So many people are instantly like, I don't think so. I must have something real going on.
Yeah.
And the key point is the symptoms are real. They're just caused
Yeah.
by the brain perceiving data.
Exactly.
So I love that. I love all about that. I don't know if you're aware, but recently came out with my book.
Yes, fantastic, Dan. I've read the book. I read it in less than 2 days.
All right,
And what I
awesome.
love about your book, Dan, is you know, how you simplify things, because that for me was a challenge in the beginning, and I think a bit of a barrier to getting better is when I was reading a lot of these books in the beginning of, you know, you have to do meditation and you have to journal and you have to do all these things.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'm not someone who has ever meditated or ever journaled. You know, it's just, and I did do it as part of Howard Scubaner's Unlearn Your Pain. And I mean, some of it is of value just to sort of make you realize sort of personality traits that maybe led you to getting these symptoms. But I don't believe any of that stuff is necessary to heal because I didn't do it for a prolonged time. And I actually did it quite sort of deep into already healing, just with the knowledge and the simple concept of you saying it's about the fear, bring down the fear,
Mhm.
and go to safety. I mean, that's the simple concept of it, of understanding why these symptoms are there, that they're not dangerous, they are awful, they are real. And I think that's another thing that is quite difficult is, as a doctor, for example, if you don't find anything wrong with a patient, but they've got severe pain and you say, okay, the patient, is almost thinking to themselves, are you going to tell me it's in my head? Like I need a
Right.
psychiatrist or something. And they take great offense to that if you
And
say, you know what,
sometimes that
maybe,
actually happens. People
yeah,
are told it's
exactly.
in your head and let me refer you to a psychiatrist.
Yeah. But
Happens.
but and I mean, even though the concept of that, if psychiatrists maybe understood this condition better, it would be not a bad idea. But as soon as you tell someone it's in your head, it's got this sort of concept or feeling of it's you making it up. It's not
Right.
real, and that's so far from the truth. I mean, pain that's created by the brain is 100% real. Those sensations are as real as structurally caused pain. They're just caused it's just a different etiology and a different treatment. So I think that whole narrative needs to change in, medical practice.
Absolutely.
There just needs to be a greater understanding of, I mean, in medical school, right in the beginning, you talked about the biopsychosocial model, but unfortunately in practice, because often doctors are so limited by how much time they've got to spend with you, it just goes like biological, like the psychosocial stuff sort of goes out the window.
Sure.
And so I think that is something that any doctor can really, especially general practitioners or family physicians, but even specialists, if a specialist is dealing with a patient who's they really can't find anything wrong and they've got these symptoms, be it chest pain, and obviously if you've got chest pain, there's lots of serious
Check,
things that can
check
cause
out your
that.
cardiology or cardiac system.
Exactly. But if your cardiologist is clearing you and you're still having these symptoms, you have to consider the
Look over
neuroplastic
here.
symptoms. Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
that's brilliant. I love it. I love that you're going to be able to carry this into your medical practice and possibly speak about it with some of your colleagues,
yeah,
possibly,
definitely.
expose other people to these things. Um, and so it's a wonderful opportunity for you to just kind of light a
Yeah,
little fire and drop a little seed and say, here's some stuff that works for me, and it's worth us considering as a medical
yeah.
community. And there are actually, not medical, mind body conferences. For example, in September, there was one from the PPD Association,
Oh, okay.
Psychophysiologic Disorder Association, and there was an actual workshop. There was 260 people. Probably a third of them were physicians, which was
Oh,
wonderful.
that's fantastic. Yeah,
Psychiatrists, therapists, coaches, scientists, researchers, all coming together to speak about these concepts. So keep an eye on those things because there's a workshop. I
definitely.
mean, it's out here in the US, you're quite far, but there is a workshop that'll be happening, I think, in September in the Boulder, Colorado area. And
Okay, that's fantastic. It's fantastic that there's becoming more awareness of these things. Um,
there's a key group of physicians who are really championing these these concepts. They're trying to pick up the where Sarno left off and carry it forward into mainstream medicine. And
mm,
it's being pushed back on, still the same lack of acceptance. Um,
mm,
there's a lot of reasons why it's hard to get this into mainstream medicine. And I'm sure you
definitely.
can imagine we don't have to discuss it. It's generally finances and
Definitely.
eliminating all
Yeah,
these tests and treatments by saying you're actually okay, you're just scared, dumbing it
exactly.
down. But that's not good for the pain management world, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I read that one book as well, Back in Control. It was written by an orthopedic surgeon, and that
Yep.
was quite a phenomenal book of how
Go.
he stopped doing so many surgeries just because these back surgeries were just futile. They were not helping patients, and he refused to actually operate on patients unless they'd been. I mean, in his case, he really believed in the journaling, which I think you agree with me. It's not necessary to do those things to heal. But the point is that he had a mind body approach before he would even think of operating on a patient. So that was an interesting book for me, written by a specialist as well.
For sure.
So,
Yeah,
and to
very
be
good.
honest, if I didn't experience this, I'd probably also be skeptical because, it's you have to almost go through it or hear someone who you trust go through it to really believe it. I did nuclear medicine. I'm very scientifically minded. I enjoy science, and it only really made sense to me when I understood the science of it. Unfortunately, a lot of these books, they do explain the science behind the pain, and it makes so much sense. So if doctors actually, take the time to understand the psychology, the physiology behind the perceived danger pain, maybe there'll be greater acceptance of it because it's scientific. It's totally scientific. It's not like, oh, this is in your head.
It's
Well, it
not
is in
woo
your
woo.
head.
Yeah, it's not
It's in
woo
your
woo.
brain.
Correct. No, this is based on how the human body, brain, nervous system, pain system all functions.
Exactly.
And
And
once you understand, go ahead. I'm sorry.
the crazy thing is, when I learnt about this, reflecting back on my life, there were actually many instances where I had this. I just didn't know it. And, I didn't panic too much about it and it just disappeared. I remember before I wrote my matric exams, I had this horrible sensation of a lump in my throat, which I later learned is globus pharyngeus, literally feels like you've swallowed something, you can't get it out. And then in medical school, I had this burning tongue syndrome for a couple of weeks. It literally felt like my tongue was on fire.
Many,
So,
very
and I had
common.
growing pains when I was growing up. So there were so many things that I thought, I just didn't know it at that point. And because I didn't, as you say, freak out about it, your nervous system is like, okay, I'm not worried. So let's just shut down the symptom.
Yeah.
But because I panicked so much with this bladder situation and I was so scared I wasn't going to be able to write my exams and qualify, that fear just, I think, put that pain cycle in overdrive, and the fear just fed that vicious circle. So yeah, it's amazing how much and also how much when you know about this condition, because as I say, until I came across your channel, then I never knew this existed. Um, you see it in patients, you see it in family members, you see it everywhere. It's just so common, and it's just so sad that so many people don't know about it. And there's such a need for people to understand how this works and get better, because you can. If I can get better from what I was going through and my skepticism in the beginning,
Mhm.
anyone can get better.
Sure. I'm sure a number of people watching are going to say, but what did you actually do? Because that's a lot of people are like, okay, so I get it. There's this thing, but what do I do? And it's a
Yeah,
kind of a trick question because it's not about what we do. It's about what we know intellectually that it becomes our
absolutely.
truth and it becomes a consistent storytelling, meaning we're telling ourselves
Exactly.
better stories like, okay, I now know what it is. This definitely applies to me. There's a way out and I'm going to get there.
Mm,
And then we have to tell ourselves a story like, all right, I do see there's some hope there. And I'm moving in that direction. And if it's a brain nervous system thing, then calming the system down is better. And when I panic, symptoms get worse. So, okay, let me connect the dots. I see the correlation between more fear equals more symptoms, and in
exactly.
your case, you panic so much. Yes, the symptoms were really rough, but the consequence of the symptoms was I'm not going to get through medical school in my exams.
Yeah.
So the consequence was enormous, which put so much pressure on you and created so much more fear
Mm,
that the symptoms, I'm not saying they were easy, but they became magnified. And they literally did grow and increase in severity based on all of the pressure and the perceived danger of not being able to do the exams.
exactly. But in terms of what did I do? So I think the first thing I didn't do is fixing activities, as you say. So I stopped doing any sort of physical work to get myself better. And I started very, very slowly challenging myself to do the physical activities that I wanted to do. So instead of doing all these stretches, I wanted to do running. So even if it was starting off with 50 meters, that's what I did. And it was quite a balance between, reassuring myself, but also listening to my body and knowing, I'm really pushing through severe pain here. And you don't want to heighten yourself and your nervous system when you're already in pain. So, as I mentioned, it's because of these symptoms being sort of inconsistent, they up and down. If I was having a really bad flare day, I wasn't going to go and try and now run, but on a day that I felt, okay, this is actually a bit of a better day, then I would challenge myself to do that. And if I got a symptom, I would just not, as you say, I think you said freak out less. You don't have to totally not freak out. You don't have to, I was very bad at catastrophizing a lot, and I had to learn to stop doing that. And it's not like you go from totally catastrophizing to being totally chilled and relaxed about the symptom. It doesn't work like that.
There's 85 steps in the middle.
Exactly. You have to just slowly, slowly reassure yourself and don't, go from I can't even walk to try and run a 10K. It's really baby steps. And that's why it took me sort of 6 months to get, really, really to the point where I can say I'm pretty much pain free. I mean, like I say, maybe once in a blue moon now when I go out, I might get a bit of a twinge of a symptom, but I don't think much of it. And before I know it, the symptom's gone. So I'm definitely free of chronic pain, that's for sure. And that's the goal, is to be free of chronic pain.
Yeah.
And
You
and
have you have recovered from the fear, which is
yeah,
what recovery is all about. Because if you get a twinge and you say, I know what that is, I'm not concerned,
yeah,
it goes away.
yeah,
And that's recovery. Recovery
yeah,
doesn't mean you never ever feel a sensation in your body again. It means that you're no longer afraid of it because you know what it is and what to do.
exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly, yeah. So thank you, Dan. I want to use this opportunity to say thank you for introducing me to this whole concept and your
Thrilled to be able to help.
simple way that simple way you explain things. Because I think if I had to go by a lot of other sort of chronic pain channels and this whole very sort of stipulated regimen of doing these meditations and these journalings and all this stuff, I think that would have been very off-putting for me because, it's just didn't align with me. It's felt like a chore, and healing shouldn't feel like a chore. It's the way that you simplify the concepts, and especially in your book, which such a fantastic book. Recommend anyone to read your book. And I mean, I've read a lot of. I'm an avid reader, and I've read a lot of books on this. Neuroplastic pain. And I love the way that your book simplifies the concepts and takes away all the fluff, that is not necessary. And it just really literally gives you what you need to heal and what you need to understand the concepts which are necessary to heal.
Well, thank you
So
so
well
much.
done. Well done on that, Dan.
Well,
Fantastic work.
I'm humbled by the comparison to the other books because some of the other books are written by very amazing people, and I've learned so much from many of them. And at the conference,
Definitely.
most of them in person for the first time, so it was
Yeah.
wonderful.
And
So,
they are fantastic, and I really enjoyed reading every book I've mentioned. But as I say, what I like about your sort of approach is just how when you've in so much pain and you've suffered for so long and you've tried so many things, you don't want 500 pages of you know pain science and doing all these things that you need to do, and you need 3 hours a day and all that stuff. You just want such a concise point of reference to get well, and that's what your book provides. So I believe it's going to help a lot of people.
I really appreciate that. Um, Thank you so much for sharing. It will definitely give people with urinary bladder and what I now believe is a false diagnosis of IC,
Yeah.
right? Because there's never any evidence of a embedded infection, was there? It was
Yeah, well, I
simple.
mean, if you look at the AUA guidelines of how you diagnose IC, you don't even actually need a scope. I mean, it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So if you have pain, pressure, or discomfort in the pelvic area with frequency of more than 10 times a day or urgency due to the pain, and you've excluded other causes like endometriosis, for example, and you
Sure.
haven't responded to antibiotics, you are actually diagnosed with IC. And I think they updated the guidelines to say because if you look from a medical point of view, interstitial cystitis means actually inflammation of the bladder wall. But because that's not actually true, they've now changed it to IC/BPS, which is bladder pain syndrome. And a lot of people, on these sort of communities or forums have had an issue with that because they say, oh, now it's undermining what we have because, we really have inflamed bladder walls. And I mean, they say 5 to 10% do have Hanna's ulcers, but it's another, for me, question of, are the Hanna's ulcers actually causing the pain? It's like with the back pain, how many people have MRIs and they've got, degenerative disc disease? Is that really what's causing the pain, or is it just an incidental finding? So I
So
think
many
even if you do,
details.
I think even if you do have Hannah's ulcers, applying this stuff cannot harm you. It can only help you because catastrophizing never helped anyone get better. Um,
Exactly.
so yeah, and you know what's the resistance to this stuff, even in the pain communities, is quite sad. I mean, I know I posted once in one of the RC support groups on Facebook that I was on, some link to sort of neuroplastic pain, and it was deleted by the admins. So I think that's quite sad. It's like they almost, I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't want to have an open mind and say, maybe I'm not doomed with this awful condition. I mean, when some people enter the group, you welcomed with, welcome to the club no one wants to be a part of. And it's just such a
Well,
negative narrative. It's just awful.
right.
So
Uh, if I can, I think that stems from the belief that if you're told you have a mind-body condition, you're being called crazy and it's in your head. So I think
yeah,
there is such a violent reaction to being categorized as that because you're calling me crazy. I'm not making it up. This is real. And that's where the venomous response comes from. And the moderators of these groups are saying, I don't want to insult my people, so I'm going to protect them from anybody who suggests anything other than you're
yeah,
sick and broken.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
there's a lot of psychology there. There's a lot of um, just a lot of stuff that is really hard for people to accept. It took you a while.
yeah, exactly.
You rejected it at first because you didn't see, healing bladder pain. You saw healing back pain, and you were like, well, this doesn't apply.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and so it's difficult to get everybody on the same page, but stories like yours will help people with the non-standard, mechanical back pain or mechanical pains or things like that. So you're doing a great service for everybody who's dealing with these symptoms, men, women alike. Um, and I think you're going to do a service to your medical community where you're
Thanks,
practicing,
Dan.
because I think when you see the opportunities, you're going to share it.
Definitely. Definitely. Like I say, since I've learned about this, you just see it so often. You really do. You see it in friends, family,
Yeah.
patients. And
Everybody's
yeah, you
got
just want to
something.
scream it. You really
Everybody's
do.
got something going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can spot it a mile away.
Yeah. So true.
So listen, I really appreciate you. This has been great. Love to hear your story. Love that you're a medical doctor. That gives some credibility to this. Um, a different type of
Absolutely.
credibility, right? I've had
Yeah.
other medical doctors as well as chiropractors, as well as dentists. So it's really neat to see the medical community utilizing this stuff to get better themselves.
Definitely.
And that
Because at the
will,
end of the day, we want to help patients, and you feel like a failure when you can't help. So you look for every single possible cause when it's actually TMS, mind body syndrome, neuroplastic pain.
sure,
There's such a lack of knowledge, and my goal with doing this is to just educate, to look a bit further than what the medical school textbooks taught you.
of course.
Um, and yeah, your work you're doing is fantastic, Dan. And I'm ever grateful to you for introducing me to this work and ultimately getting better to where I am today. So thank you, Dan.
Awesome. I'm thrilled to be a part of your story. Um, so again, thank you so much. If I can ever do anything for you, let me know.
Thanks, Dan.
Glad to help out in any way possible. But I'm really
Thanks so
proud of you.
much.
You implemented, you got it done, and now you're sharing it. So I couldn't appreciate you more.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it as
Right.
well.
Not a problem at all.
Thank
Keep
you.
an eye out. It
Okay,
should be out within a few days. So
perfect.
keep an eye out. If you'd like to watch along in the comments on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to look at them. If you'd like to participate and, you know, respond to some, you're welcome to, but don't feel obligated to.
Fantastic. Now I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dan. Keep
Hello.
well. Thank you so
All right.
much. Bye bye.